Hi, welcome to What Shines Above. My name is Ivan, and today what I'd like to do is talk to those of us out there that use the Dwarf 3 uh, smart telescope by Dwarf Lab, who are looking to up their game in their post-processing of their photos. Earlier, I did a video where I talked about maybe transitioning from Stellar Studio to Siril, which is a great free application. But today, what I'd like to do is talk about transitioning from Stellar Studio or other smart telescope internal post-processing platforms, transitioning from those to Pixinsight. And so what I'm going to do today is just show a brief workflow of what you might expect to see if you use Pixinsight and if you're coming from the Dwarf 3 specifically, because that's what I have in terms of my smart telescope. And so I will show kind of just a brief overview of what it looks like going from Stellar Studio to Pixinsight. Now let's get the elephant out of the room. Pixinsight is not free. Stellar Studio is included. It's free. Siril is free. SETI Astro Suite Pro is free, although those developers do appreciate any donation that you might offer, but however, they're not mandatory, which is awesome. Pixinsight does not fall under that category. And so we'll get started here in just a bit, and we'll talk about the pricing because it's a consideration for sure. But in any case, we'll move through this, and just if you have any questions or comments, put it down in the comment section below. Otherwise, let's get started. Okay, let's get started. So what I'm going to do, this is the Pixinsight website. And again, the obstacle here, the elephant in the room, is the price of Pixinsight. It is not free. It is way not free. And I think currently right now it is 300 euros. And if you are in, I think, which currently comes out to about $360 American. And so, I mean, that's not free. That's expensive, and that actually approaches the price of like a Dwarf Mini or something like that, or maybe a C-Star S30. And so, not cheap. But as far as it being an obstacle to you, that's something only you can answer. I will say, for me, I looked at it as an investment, and over the course of a long period of time. I mean, these are lifetime prices to the best of my knowledge, and I feel like it's something I can grow with, and I think it's a quality product. I'm not trying to take away from Siril or SETI Astro or any other program, but I do think that this is a great program. Now, it would be incomplete to talk about Pixinsight without talking about some plugins from RC Astro. And these are very commonly used plugins within Pixinsight. These are, I believe these will also work within Photoshop and Affinity. The three big ones are Blur Exterminator, Noise Exterminator, and Star Exterminator. And they're very well done scripts, plugins, whatever you want to call them. But they are also not free. And if you look here at the pricing between the three big ones, BlurX, NoiseX, and StarX, that adds up to about $220. So if you take $220 and add it to $360, now you're at $580. And now you're definitely approaching the price of a very nice smart telescope. But again, I'm coming at this from an investment. I think it's important. I love the way these plugins work. But it is up to you to decide if it is worth it for you. There are free trials for these plugins, and there is a free trial for Pixinsight as well. It is not uncommon on like a Facebook group to have somebody comment on a picture. Gosh, that looks great. It's colorful. It's above and beyond what I see in Stellar Studio. How did you do that? And very often it will be Pixinsight, if not Siril or SETI Astro. And I mean, just real quick though, let me just point this out. If this is what you're using, this is Andromeda, this is process in Stellar Studio mostly. I did download this to my phone, and I applied a little bit of a vivid filter that's built into the iPhone platform. I mean, just a smidge. This did not take me long to do, and I think this is a good looking image. And so it's, you know, this can be done. You don't need any of these other programs, but if you are looking to go that next step, I think you have to look at an astrophotography specific post-processing suite. So with that said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to load up into Pixinsight, and we're just going to go through a process real quick. It won't take very long. And if you have any questions or comments, again, in the comment section below. Okay, so here we are. Here we are in Pixinsight. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to load up a stacked image that was processed within Pixinsight. When you're running a Dwarf section, Dwarf 3 session rather, or whether it's a mini or a C-star, you're downloading your images, and eventually those images should be stacked. You can do that within the Dwarf Lab environment, but you can also do it externally through Pixinsight, Siril, or SETI Astro. From here on, I'm just going to say Pixinsight, but most of this will apply to the other ones as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a file, and actually we'll go back a directory. When you stack a series of images within Pixinsight, you end up with these 4 directories, and the one you want to go to is master, and you're looking for the one that ends in auto crop. So you would click on that and open it. And you're going to get 2 files. And what you're going to do is you're going to close the one that says gray, and then you're going to get to this one. So what is this? This looks dark. It doesn't look like it's showing anything at all. And this is a linear image. It has not been stretched. Very briefly, what does that mean? Well, when you're zoomed in on some of these deep space objects, the sky is relatively dark, and there's very little light. That actually makes it to the sensor, which is why you leave the sensor open for a while, the aperture, gathering all that light, letting it collect on the sensor, and eventually it builds up to where it becomes more and more visible. But even having done that and having stacked all those images, it's still very, very dim. So this is a linear image. What that means is that it's at its normal light levels. So we can't see anything, so we have to do a temporary stretch. And that just simply means we're going to turn up the brightness to the point where this image makes sense and we can see it, so we can start to process it. So there's a bunch of ways to do that. And I'm going to start with this one here, and I'm going to do an auto stretch. And that doesn't look right. A lot of green there. And so that's because this is a linked stretch. And that just means that your RGB channels are linked, but they're not balanced right, which is why you have this green cast, this green overtone. So we're going to do an unlinked stretch. And that is more what we're seeing now. So this is an unlinked stretch. This is the Orion Nebula. And that's what we're going to work on today. And so I did in the previous video with Siril, I kind of showed a histogram, and I'll do that again here. So I'm going to come over here at histogram transformation and open it up. And let's look up here. And basically when I slide this over to here and turn this up, actually have to select the image first. And now we can see a distinct red, blue, and green. And they're not overlapping. That means they're not currently linked. And when they were linked, the green was very prominent. And we're going to come back to this a little bit later, but that's what that means by linked and unlinked. If the terminology I'm using is not making sense, either because I'm just not explaining it well, as I'm new at this too, there are tons of videos out there that talk about linear versus nonlinear, and I will put some links to some of the better ones below. So the next thing I want to do is I just want to start processing this. And I want to point out here that this green line under this right here means that this has not been permanently stretched. And at some point, we will permanently stretch our image. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to right-click on the desktop, process icons, load process icons. And this is just a collection of different scripts and process icons that I've collected, either that were built into Pixinsight or that other people on the internet have provided some of them. And these are also basically like shortcuts. You can open up like any process and shrink it down and make it into an icon. And this is kind of my workflow. And this space here, everything above it is essentially has not been permanently stretched yet. Some of these processes need to happen while it's in its linear mode. So even though I can see this, it has not been stretched. We know that, permanently stretched, because of that green line. So the very first thing I do is I'm going to do a background extraction. I use Graxpert. I just like it. It's relatively fast. I think it works well. And it's just what I'm comfortable with. And we're going to get a new image here. This is what it kind of determined the background was, and it took that out and made a much better image. I'm just going to close that. I don't need that. I'm going to go to my main image. This is the initial image, and I'm going to shrink it down, and I'm going to put it over here out of the way in case I want to come back to that. So now I'm left with this image, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to color calibrate it. And we did this in Siril as well, but we're also going to do it here. So this is going to basically kind of plate solve and color calibrate. And you saw how I just dragged it onto the work in process. And this is a plot that it determines. We don't really need to worry about that. Well, that doesn't look good. And so right now it is stretched, but we need to make it, now we can make it a linked stretch because we color calibrated it, and now it's much better. So if I'm not mistaken, let's try this again. I'll come over here. And now we can see that they're much more aligned. I know it's hard to see here, but they're much more aligned. They're not staggered around. This is a much more balanced after it's been color calibrated. And now we don't have that green cast. Again, this is a little harder to see than on the Siril histogram, but that is what is going on. So now I want to do some more work to it. I'm going to run this blur exterminator. If I were to open it up, this is what it would look like. But I'm not going to change any of those parameters. I'm just going to drag this over here and let it do its thing. It's usually pretty quick. And now I'm going to do noise exterminator. And this is probably my favorite plugin. And just a really, really good job. And that even almost by itself looks awesome. So, but now I'm going to permanently stretch it. Everything else I'm going to do past this step within Pixinsight is typically done on a permanently stretched image. Note the green line. So I use the SETI Astro script for stretching. I just find it to be very easy to use. It usually does a really good job. The statistical stretch. And we'll get a preview of what it's going to look like. I'm happy with that. I have in the past changed some of these parameters. This is basically where I have it left. It's what works. I'm going to hit execute. And now it's done. This is a pretty fast process. Note that the green line is done. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to extract the stars. This is another one of the RC Astro plugins, Star Exterminator. I'm just going to drag it in. I think this is by far the best Star Exterminator. And I think that looks great. I'm going to double click here and I'm just going to rename this Stars. Just makes it easier to keep track of. I'm going to shrink it down, move it over to here. I'm going to rename this Nebula. And now you can see I have the nebula by itself, not with the stars. So if I'm editing color or brightness, I can edit the nebula without editing the stars. And this is probably one of the most important concepts of post-processing astrophotography, is that you can break this stuff apart and really get in there and hone in on what you're trying to affect. So the very first thing I do typically is I'm going to do a curves. And this is just basically I'm boosting or cutting signal based on either color or just overall hue or just brightness. And in this case, it's going to be brightness. So what I'm going to do is up here, I'm going to turn the brighter aspects up a little bit. Well, and we won't see it because I don't have there we go. That's the preview. And I'm going to turn that up just a little bit. The challenge is, at least with this particular photo, is my center here is really kind of blown out. There's more detail than that. And so I don't want to blow it out even more. But I still would want to bring down some of this other nebulosity. So, and this is to taste. Whatever feels best. But you just want to kind of darken it just a little bit. So the brighter stuff is a little bit brighter. The darker stuff is a little bit darker. It makes this nebulosity a little less prominent. And again, you just kind of play with it. You can go to extremes. That's way too much. I'm somewhere around there. That's what I like. So I'm going to apply it. And you see how it got more pronounced? That's because now we're applying this as if we were applying it twice. And that's why it looks this way. Now, some people will actually hit the button twice because they like that second look. I find this to be way, way too dark. So this is what it actually looks like. And the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to reset everything. I'm going to turn on this, and I'm going to push the overall saturation up. And the reason I'm doing this is in the plugin I'm going to try after this, I want it to have something to grab onto. So I'm just going to push this, and it's just going to make things a little more pronounced. And that's pushed. And so we can kind of see what's going on there. And I just, again, it's a little more pronounced. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to apply that. See how it's more pronounced because it's running it through twice. I'm going to stop that. And now I've got this. I'm going to close this out. And from here on, you're just doing stuff. I mean, you might have a plan if you've really been doing this for a while, which I have not. You might have a very specific and it's done. I just kind of go back and forth. I tweak a little bit here. I'd mess around with a little bit here, and just to kind of make it look good until I think it looks good. So the next one I'm going to put up is narrowband normalization. And this is going to change the overall palette based off of the bands of the frequency of the light. So this is a dual band filter, and it's going to take that into account. I'm going to turn this on, and you can see right away it just changed everything. And these are just different palettes. I think this is one of the better ones. This is the Hubble palette. I just like this one. I think it's a little more pronounced through here. I can come down here. I can try different settings here. That looks kind of neat. That really made some of that detail pop out. Look right around here. If I do hydrogen alpha, That kind of looks kind of neat. I'm going to boost this oxygen signal a little bit. It's going to bring in a little more blue. If I go this way versus this way, I can reset it, try it again. I like that. And then I think that's all I'm going to do for that. So I'm going to apply this. See now how it's overpronounced? Again, it's applying the effect to the recently affected photograph. So we don't want that. Unless you do want it, then just click the square again. It'll reapply it again. And so now I've got this, and this is looking nice. But I think I want to come back, and I'm going to open up another curves. And I'm going to go to saturation again. Yeah, and now I'm going to open it up a little more. And I might even add another brightness and darken that outer nebulosity just a little bit. Not much. And if I come up on this brightness, it just blows out that center. But I think that's actually looking pretty good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply that. And this is one of those times where which one do I like? I kind of like how that's super kind of red there. Is that too much? I don't know. Nah, I'm not going to. I was thinking about hitting that square again and adding that effect again, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to use this and reset. And I think by and large, I think I'm happy with this image. And again, you could just keep going. The possibilities are essentially endless. But I think that's good enough for what we're trying to do today. I'm going to close this out. So now I'm going to recombine the stars with this image. And in the Siril video, I also discussed that there's another way to put the images back together using affinity. And in fact, I made a separate video for that. I invite you to look at it. I'll put a link in the description. But basically, there's a couple of different ways to put these back together. I prefer to recombine in affinity, but you can recombine here. And so notice I have this as nebula, and then I have this down here is stars. So I'm going to recombine these. So let's recombine with Pixel Math, and I have this made into a little preset. And this is the one formula in Pixel Math that will recombine things. And you can see here I have the names of the files, and I could change that. But I'm just going to go ahead and hit the square. And now that gives me, I can shrink these other guys down. And this gives me my finished product. And I think that looks pretty good. And it didn't take very long, and there was so much more I could have done. But in any case, this is just an example of using Pixinsight to take your Dwarf or C-Star smart telescope imaging to the next level, above and beyond the in-house internal processing or cloud processing offered by those companies. So I hope that was helpful. Again, just a quick overview of Pixinsight, kind of aimed for those of us that use smart telescopes and are new at astrophotography. I think Pixinsight gets a bad rap for being complicated and hard to learn. I don't think that's true at all, at least relatively speaking. I don't think it's any harder or easier to learn than Siril or SETI Astro. Cost is a factor. We went over that for sure. And again, there's free trials, and at the end of this, you may find that it's just too much of a financial hurdle to overcome, or just not worth it, depending on how much time that you want to put into this. In any case, if you have questions, and if I can answer them, please put them in the comment section below. I will put in some links for some of the better descriptions of linear images. And otherwise, I hope you guys have a great day, an even better night, clear skies.